welcome to Rudy Sissoo's Science Fantasy Experience. So a few videos ago I had a look at the NECA Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles done in the arcade style, right here. And a subscriber contacted me on Messenger and we had this really good chat all about arcade games, computer games and console games, because I'd been talking about my love of Street Fighter 2 and the arcade version of Turtles, and those are two of my favourite arcade games of all time. And we were chatting backwards and forwards, just discussing all manner of computer games, from the ZX Spectrum 48K to the GameCube to the Xbox, present day. And then when the conversation had finished, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna write a top 5 greatest console games of all time, just for fun, just to see what I would choose and the reasons why. And then I just thought, do you know what, why not vlog it? So yeah, these are my top 5 console games of all time, in ascending order. But it wouldn't be a top 5 without doing maybe 2 honourable mentions, because they just didn't make it into the top 5, but they're incredibly good, and there is merit within those games. And it's a bit of a thing whenever you go on the Cybertron website, so they always do the top 5 best Transformers moustaches, and they always do a couple of honourable mentions. So yeah, my first honourable mention is going to be Grand Theft Auto Vice City. I love that game. I really enjoyed Grand Theft Auto 3. When it came back, and it was an open play. But the first one, the third one, kind of generic. It was only when it became Vice City and it was set in the 80s that it really grabbed my attention. It's such a great story and so open, and even though it doesn't make it into the top 5, the one element which not many other games do is the fact that when you get into a car you have a changeable radio station. I think that is such an interesting and innovative part to a computer game. You can switch channels between Flash FM and the Wild Style, the pirate hip hop radio station, and the Oliver Ladykiller Biscuit, the 80s soul romantic radio station. You can pick and choose how you want to play the game. I remember doing a part where I think you get into the helicopter, and I was playing the game and it must have been like 6 o'clock in the morning, game time, and I'm just sniping people away with Toto's Africa playing in the background with all the sun flares, and I was just like, wow, this is a pure gaming moment. So yeah, that's my first honourable mention, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. And my other honourable mention is a recent game, I guess, 2011, 2012, and that would be the Elder Scrolls Skyrim. That is a phenomenal game, and I'm surprised a little that it didn't make it in to the top 5. That was the last game that I really truly played a lot, and I mean that by whenever it was my day off from university or work, I would be getting up and then turning on the PlayStation 3 at 9 o'clock in the morning and playing straight through until 5 PM when I had to make dinner, just literally non-stop. I've played the game through 3 times, once as a wood elf, second time as an orc, and the third as a Khajiit. Once as a mage, once as a warrior, and once as a thief an assassin, and it's the level of gameplay is really captivating and held on to me for a long time, and a computer game hasn't done that, you know, not since the mid 2000s. It's everything with that game, you know, the soundtrack, the playability, the openness, you know, how you design your character, the minutiae of how you want your character's face to look. It's incredible, but didn't make it into the top 5, sadly. So coming in at number 5 is Wipeout 2097, back from 96, 97 on the PlayStation. I went out to go and buy my PlayStation. I'd saved up months and months of, you know, pocket money, part-time work to get, you know, the latest, in some ways, the next generation console. You know, I'd had the Super Nintendo and I'd not had something for a while, and then the PlayStation came out, and in some ways it eclipsed everything that had come before at that moment in time, and it was at that point the next generation of gaming. And the game that I wanted the most, and the bundle that I went for, was the Wipeout 2097 bundle with an extra controller. That game is really evocative of the mid-90s for me, from the way that the box art looked, the graphics in the game, the pure speed of the game, how the game played, futuristic racing games with weapons, and an incredible alternative dance music soundtrack with the likes of Fluke and The Prodigy. It just, everything tied into one, and it was, you know, cool to like PlayStation, and that kind of game epitomised that moment in time. You know, one of my favourite films actually is Hackers, the mid-90s film with Johnny Lee Miller and Angelina Jolie. And the original Wipeout game was used in the arcade scene, and it oozes a time of high art and graphic, and it looks very Japanese with the typeface, you know, and the big bold block colours. Like when you look at photos of Shibuya Terminal, that's pretty much what the game looked like. And it's a pick up and play. You can literally just turn the machine on and play a track. You know, it eases into the game. It's only when you start understanding how to do air brakes and finding out that these harder tracks are somewhat a lot easier once you know how to play the game. Phenomenal game, and that's why it makes it into the top 5. Moving on, number 4, Halo Combat Evolved. You know, the title game of the Xbox. When I found out that Microsoft were making their own console, it was extremely exciting, knowing how powerful it was going to be, and the lead game was going to be Halo. And I hadn't really been gaming then, so I was kind of just like, yeah, it's kind of cool. I just don't really know much about Microsoft because I've never owned a PC. The last time I did have a computer was a Commodore 64, so I was just like, yeah, okay, it's kind of cool. And then it was only when I played a demo of Halo Combat Evolved that I was just like, this is mind-blowing. I couldn't believe that such a game was coming out, and it was just a little tester that we had in HMV where I worked. And then when I got the game, when I got the console, it was second to none. I just couldn't stop playing it for hours and on end. The story is so good, and the voice acting in it is really well done. And you know, it's now Master Chief is an iconic character. And what makes it go into the top 4 is how the combat controls work. The fact that you can have all these different configurations of how to use the controller. Because I remember first picking up and playing it and thinking, oh my god, this is really, really difficult. How do you strafe left and right with this stick? And then you just work through and you can see that I'm like sort of legacy inverted. That's how I play, because I'd rather be able to use the stick to move around and then strafe with the other one and fire one way. And it's just, they really went into detail on how comfortable to play the game. The fact that you can get vehicles for a bit, that's always a great one when you have a first person shooting game. Halo Combat Evolved. Right, number 3. This is one of the best Mario games ever made, for so many reasons, and that would be Super Mario Bros. 3. You know, it was in some ways at the end of the NES's life. It was one of the last kind of ones to come out, and it is an absolute tour de force. It's the side-scrolling platform game that everyone can understand and love. But the fact that it was so much more than that, the fact that there's 7 zones to go through, the fact that some levels are timed levels, so the screen moves along and you have to keep up with the screen. It developed the Mario ethos, is that the right thing? More along the way. It dropped in new suits, the frog suit, the Tanuki suit, the ability to fly, the ability to jump in a green boot and bounce along the enemy floor and not lose a life. The colours are bold and vivid. It's actually a really difficult game. They took the development of that game so far, and it's such a great game to play no matter what age you are. And why it gets so high, why it gets to number 3, is it made it into popular culture in the fact that it debuted in a film called The Wizard with Fred Savage, where he needs to take his little brother to this gaming kind of expo competition, and the last game they play was Super Mario Bros. 3, and it was a new unveiling of the game. What other computer game really makes it into the heights of a Hollywood film? Only that one. Truly phenomenal game, and it's thoroughly enjoyed playing that as a kid. Number 2, Tomb Raider for the PlayStation. What a phenomenal and worldwide cultural phenomenon was Tomb Raider. When I was compiling this list, I just thought back to when I first played Tomb Raider, and I just remember it like defining that part of the console generation back in the mid-90s. I remember watching Games Master with Dominic Diamond on a Thursday on Channel 4 at 6:30. And it was a good year before, and they'd kind of done this little segment about, this is the next generation of gaming. We're going to be getting this Indiana Jones inspired computer game, but it's going to have a girl in it. And seeing it back then, the graphics were ridiculously good, and it was all being compared to the likes of the Sega Mega Drive and the Super Nintendo, and this idea of it, being open to wander around as you please. Dual weapons, different guns to have, fighting a T-Rex. It's an incredible game and an incredible gaming experience. I remember another memory I have is playing it late at night, not closing the curtains and having one of the windows open, and the eerie music, some of the music was so kind of spookily done, and it got faster and faster at different points when, you know, a bear was going to come out and get you, or a crocodile was going to chase you through the water, and you can't shoot in the water, so you just knew you got to swim for dear life because this croc was going to eat you. Or when those skulking mummy things, which breathe really heavily and then literally jump at you at the screen. Playing that at, you know, 11 o'clock at night with the window open. What an idiot. It's all just the stuff of nightmares. I think it defined, as I mentioned before, it defined a generation of gaming, and it propelled the PlayStation to, in some ways, where it is today. That was, you know, one of the defining games of that period. And it wasn't even first released on the PlayStation, I don't think. I think it came out on the Saturn first. But it was the game that really took PlayStation from like there to up there. It's a remarkable game. And then finally, the number one console game of all time for me is The Legend of Zelda. Oh, I can't even get my words out. I'm getting too excited thinking about it. The Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time. This game is unbeatable. And I don't mean the fact that you can't win at it. This is the only game I personally have ever scored at 100%. I cannot fault this game in one instant. Even the water temple. I don't mind how hard or unruling the water temple is. It added to how good the game is. Again, I think that's the game that defined the N64. It was a huge step up from the above screen Zelda game from the Super Nintendo. You know, it was, you know, the fourth person, you're right behind watching the action. You're in control of, you know, all of Link's actions. The storyline is ridiculously good, and it's, you know, to play the game in its entirety from non-stop, it's something like 36 hours worth of gaming to do it non-stop at, you know, 100% complete. The music, the attack, you know, the way that you control the character, automatic jumping, so you don't have to certainly worry about those bits and pieces. The fact that you spend time as a young Link and then an adult Link. It develops the story of, you know, Zelda hiding as Sheik. There's so much intricacies with that game, and I don't think a game has remotely come close to beating that 100% for me, because it has everything that I could possibly want from a computer game. The fact that it came as a gold cartridge, just an added little nugget for you there. I've played through it a vast amount of times, whether it be on the original N64 or on the Wii, or I actually played it on the GameCube when it came with the Wind Waker as an extra disc, and it's a game that I can keep going back to. Even though you play it in pretty much exactly the same way, it just, every few years I just want to go back and play it and experience being Link, you know. I always think about what kind of science fantasy era or universe that I'd love to live in, and I'd love to live in Hyrule. As strange as that might sound, you know, some people would like to live on Cybertron or live in, you know, the world of, you know, the Targaryens and Jon Snow. They'd like to live in Westeros. No, I would love to visit Hyrule. Yeah, a 64-bit world. That's where I'd choose to visit. So yeah, these have been my top 5 all-time favourite console games.